everyone, welcome to the June 24th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Mulkowski, and this weekend we're looking ahead to Saturday's card at Churchill Downs. As you're probably aware, no turf racing scheduled at Churchill for the next several weeks, but that didn't deter them from putting together a pretty decent set of races for this Pick 5 sequence on Saturday, as the feature race there is race 9, the Chicago Stakes, which has drawn a surprisingly strong field for a Grade 3 event. We'll talk about that one a little bit later. Fillies and mares sprinting 7 furlongs on the main track. But Craig, it's not like any race in this sequence is particularly easy. It's hard to narrow it down to more than 2 or 3 horses, as every one of these legs is pretty competitive.
Yeah, I really enjoyed handicapping this pick 6. I'm going to be honest. It's some good quality, good field size. The purses for these allowance races are just crazy good. I mean, I didn't realize they basically reached Kentucky Downs level or even better now. So just some really strong races. We don't see many these conditioned allowance races, but we get a non-winners of 1, non-winners of 2, and a non-winners of 3. So a lot to dig into here.
Let's begin things with race 6, as this Pick 5 sequence does run through 6 through 10, the end of the card being the 10th race. The 6th is an optional claiming 62,500, non-winners of 2 other than the allowance condition. Note the distance of this race, just 5.5 furlongs. Don't often see too many high-level allowance races carded going this short at a major circuit like Churchill Downs, and I think that's going to be interesting to discuss with the pace of this race, how competitive it is on the front end, and if riders get especially aggressive going this 5.5 furlong distance. Fillies and mares in this one, and Craig, it's totally wide open. I'm not sure exactly where to start. I think if you're looking at the pace projector, a horse that's likely to be forward is the number 5, Bomb Diggity, for Steve Asmussen, a runner that has shown a lot of early speed in her prior starts when she's been able to get out of the gate.
Yeah, and I'll admit these 5.5, something to keep in mind. They're quite different from 6 furlongs at Churchill, which has a really long run up. The 5.5 is a more traditional run up. So it's even more of a cutback than you would normally think of. And the horse you mentioned, Bomb Diggity, I think she's the horse to beat personally in here. She's one I will definitely be using on my tickets. I believe she has the fastest last race speed figure, if I'm not mistaken, with a 101. And I don't think there was anything fake about it. And of all the horses in here, she is the one that I think would appreciate the turn back in distance most. She's drawn to the outside of a couple of the faster horses, so I don't think it's as imperative that she get a perfect break. But when she does get out, as you mentioned, she's been really good. Her debut was at 6.5, maybe a little too long for her, but she's handled 6 the last 2 times she tried it. And yeah, I think she is a strong contender. Another one in here that I want to give a long look to at more of a price is the 4-horse Sunday Grace. And she's moving back to dirt after a stakes try last time and what was a really pretty strong stakes race on the turf at 5 furlongs, won by Twilight Gleaming. But what caught my eye is a race before that at Indiana Downs, where she won by nearly 8 lengths. So I guess it's Horseshoe Indiana now. I don't want to get the wrath of anyone there. But she ran a good speed figure that day. She did it from just a little bit off the pace, pressing it. And I just think this is a really good distance for her as well. She is excelled at it in her 2 tries. And I think she's one that's going to offer some value.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this pace does shake out. The TimeformUS pace projector not predicting a fast pace in this race, but it does show 3 runners vying for supremacy on the front end, one of those being the number 5, Bomb Diggity. And I agree with what you said, Craig. It seems like the 5.5 furlongs could really suit this 3-year-old filly. Watching her last race, she had a lot of early speed, took pressure that day, setting some pretty fast fractions, put everybody away that was challenging her early, and was able to hold off a closer, Hazy Command, who looked like she had gotten the perfect trip, but Bomb Diggity was still able to hold on. So she looks like she's going to be pretty dangerous in here, though she does have to deal with some speed to her inside. A runner that I was pretty interested in, Craig, is the number 1, Short Summer Dress, though I'm curious to know what kind of trip she's going to get from the rail, because she is in that awkward position where she might not be fast enough to go with a horse like Bomb Diggity, but she tends to do her best running when she's on the lead. So I think that her rider, Ricardo Santana, is going going to have some decisions to make, breaking from the inside. I don't want to be too hard on her for her last race because she got beaten by a horse, 'Tis Splendid News, who has just been in great form for Wesley Ward. I think she was winning her third race in a row there. And Short Summer Dress, probably just a little bit overmatched in that spot, coming back in a slightly easier optional claimer this time. This is now second off the claim for Robertino Diodoro, and she's got plenty of back races that would make her awfully tough in here.
Yeah, the only thing that scares me with her is what you said, drawing inside with maybe a faster horse or two to her outside. But at this 5.5 furlong distance, I don't always pigeonhole horses into having to go wire to wire. Sometimes they can sit just off the lead. If she could get a good pocket trip, she is one I would use. And I'm using three horses in here. She was the third one.
Yeah, you mentioned Sunday Grace at a bigger price, and I have no problem with her. I actually went back and watched that race at Horseshoe Indy 2 back, and she was really impressive that day. Just finished powerfully through the wire. Wasn't beating much, and I think the big question with her is whether she can transfer that form to Churchill Downs. It appears that she's really improved coming back as a 3-year-old, and that turf race last time, as you mentioned, kind of backs up her dirt performance too back in a weird way, because she's probably not as much of a turf horse, but she's still ran well on that surface against the tougher field last time, so I can see the case for her. I was surprised to see the number 3 Alberta Sun listed at a short price in the morning line. I didn't really get her at all. She looked like she was a little bit cheaper than these and going out for a barn that has not had a whole lot of success, so I wasn't really viewing her as a contender. I am more interested in the horse right to her inside, the number 2 Queen Goal, and I wanted to kind of get your take on this horse, Craig. She had been racing exclusively in Southern California prior to this, facing some pretty good fields over there. She ran against Edgeway and Merneath back in January. Prior to that last year, she ran against horses like Bella Vita, Calypso. These are graded stakes quality horses, and she held her own against most of them. I thought she was really game in Victory 2 back. I just wonder about the trainer switch. This is actually not a private purchase. It's an auction purchase. She sold for $150,000 back in February at Fasig Tipton. So trainer change here, layoff, cutback in distance. I'm not sure what to make of that, but on raw talent, doesn't it seem like she stacks up pretty well against this field?
It does. I just, and nothing against Kelsey Danner, but she's not John Sadler. And I have to imagine that he probably got the best out of her. So she's not one I would be looking to make a big jump forward. And particularly coming off the layoff, it's not a great stat for Kelsey Danner, nor is first time in the barn. I mean, she's not terrible. It's okay, but she wasn't one I was too excited about in this spot.
Yeah, I wasn't anticipating liking her that much, but going back and watching her races, I liked what I saw. She's a really game horse. She tries really hard, and I feel like she could work out the right trip from off the pace if they do go crazy on the front end, because she's one of the few in this field who has proven that she can pass horses. So I have the reservations that you do, Craig, but I did not want to leave her out. She's 6-1 in the morning line. I feel like she has to take more money than that just because her form looks pretty appealing in this field, but I have to view her as a contender. So I was kind of leaning most towards the 1, 2, and 5, but I have no argument with the number 4 at a bigger price, Sunday Grace, that Craig highlighted.
Yeah, before we move on, I totally agree with you about Alberta's Son. I don't see how that horse is going to take that much money just off the claim and the trainer change. It's clearly not. It's Mike Maker going to a lesser known trainer. So yeah, I just don't see it.
Things don't get too much easier in the next race, which is a maiden special weight event going 6.5 furlongs on the main track for the 3-year-old male or 3 and up males. And not a whole lot of form in this race, Craig. We've got a number of first-time starters to consider. And the horse that is listed as the favorite on the morning line, I know is not the kind of horse that either you or I like to take generally, the number 9 Engrave, who has just had plenty of chances and has kind of been a bit of a disappointment going back to the start of his career.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. He's never the kind of horse I want to bet. And maybe some people will be just tempted to use him because he's going to be a short price. He's probably, I guess, in some people's eyes, the most likely winner. He runs decent speed figures for the class. But for me, I just can never bet a horse like this. So not only am I not going to use it, I'm definitely going to try to beat him. And I had a hard time getting excited about any of the horses who aren't on debut in here. The The next one I guess you have to talk about is Lucky Devil, but he's a horse who was in for a tag last time, albeit a $75,000 tag. It's still a tag, and he ran okay, beating the nose, but he also got a perfect setup that day. So maybe some might call it a little bit of lazy handicapping, but I'm just using all the firsters in here. I don't like any of the runners. The other one who on the morning line is 4-1 is Badge Ball. He's a horse for Greg Foley, who has taken absolutely no money in either of his two starts at this level, hasn't done much running at all. So for me, I'm just going to hope for one of the firsters because I don't like any of the ones that have run.
Yeah, of the two horses that you began with, I kind of prefer Lucky Devil, even though he's coming out of that maiden claiming race. When I went back and watched it, it was a race that featured a fast pace that came apart, but he made a nice move into the race, and actually the horse that won the race closed from behind him. That horse actually came from, I think, last place to get up, and Lucky Devil really tried to battle back in the late stages where that horse challenged him at the very end. He was a pretty game loser that day, even though he came out on the wrong side of a head bob. So I liked his effort, but like you said, he's moving into a tougher spot now. He's going to take money because he's got that exposed nose loss last time. So I didn't want to be too positive on him, but he's one that I could see myself using more so than Engrave, who is just a horse that was well meant at the start of his career for Chad Brown, never really went on. Now he's in Paulo Lobo's barn. Lobo does a good job, but he just hasn't really taken a step forward since he was a 2-year-old, and now he's 4. So I just don't like horses like that in general. The horse that probably interests me most of those with experience is the number 8, Inexorable. Kind of like the horse that you mentioned, Badge Ball. This one's a bigger price in the morning line, but he's also had just 2 starts, and he's coming off a layoff here, and I think he's got a right to improve as he makes his 3-year-old debut. Know that those prior 2 numbers were earned a long time ago, so I think just with natural maturity, he can take a step forward. And also, he faced a decent field first time out. The winner of that race, Higher Standard, looked pretty good at the time. Came back at his next start at the fairgrounds and just didn't get any pace to close into, and just kind of was able to run in the same position throughout. But I think this horse could do better coming back off the layoff for trainer Steve Margolis. He's actually a half brother to Grade 1 Carter winner Mischievous Alex, so there is pedigree for this one to pan out to be okay. Adding blinkers first time back maybe is going to add a little bit more speed to his repertoire, so at a price, he's the one with experience that I would want to include. But Craig, you were kind of alluding to the fact that you would be looking mostly at firsters in this spot. Who among those would you be most interested in?
I guess you would have to say the 4 and the 6. Call Me Fast. He's one who's by dialed in. His trainer wins at a decent rate first time out. And Veritable, Cherie DeVoe has proven to be able to win first time out as well. Has some good breeding, but I'm going to use them all for sure because I'm not going to try to split hairs with him. I don't know a whole lot about the one horse. His trainer hasn't sent out any first time starters that I was able to find. And even Sunday Breeze, another Cherie DeVoe by Connect. I just want to give all of them a chance in here.
Yeah, Cherie DeVoe does have those 2 in here. I like you, would assume it's a good sign that Louis Saez is named on the number 6, Veritable. He tends to ride live runners for Cherie. So that's probably a good sign with that one. He's by Verrazano, which I don't really think of as strong win early breeding, but there is a lot of pedigree on the dam side. He's a half-brother to a horse named Bodie Cream, who is a good turf horse for Mike Maker, but there is some dirt breeding on the bottom side. If you go a little bit deeper, the dam is a half-sister to Albertus Maximus, who I think was a Grade 1 winner on Synth, as well as Daredevil, who won the Champagne and is a nice sire now. So Veritable makes a lot of sense as the firster in here. But I think the number 4 that you mentioned, Craig, Call Me Fast, also has some things to like about him. He actually sold pretty recently at a dispersal sale back in, I want to say April, for $60,000. So that's a little bit interesting. This trainer hasn't had him for that long, but does okay with firsters, shows a couple of quick workouts at the Churchill Downs training track. So I think this one is interesting as well. I agree. I'd use both of those along with that number 8 that I mentioned, trying to beat the shorter prices in here. Let's move on to the 8th race, another allowance event, this one going 7 furlongs. It's an optional claimer, actually $80,000, non-winners of 3 other than being the allowance condition. And Craig, when I see 5-2 on the morning line on the number 5 Gunnet, I know that this is a race that I can get interested in because Gunnet is just not the kind of horse that I ever want to take at a short price. He typically takes money and just so rarely wins races.
Yeah, is he the horse that never changes leads or has
that is him? And I watched his last race, and he was up to his old antics, just kind of hanging on that left lead. The rider kept shifting his weight, trying to get him over to his right lead. It never happened, and that's just his MO. He always travels well, but just tends to hang on that left lead and not find that extra oomph at the end of his races.
Yeah, and that's something that would explain that 3 for 24 record. Oftentimes at pretty short prices, not getting the job done. He was tried in some stakes races for a while, but interestingly enough, all 3 of his wins have come in a maiden and 2 allowance races, which is why he's in this non-winners of 3 race. This is a race I started with the pace projector, and the 4-horse county final is shown on a clear early lead. And when I look through the past performances, I can't really argue with that because there just is not a lot of speed in this race. And he's a horse I think is going to be dangerous, not just because of the clear lead, but he's run some pretty fast races. 2 back at Oaklawn, he ran a 112 speed figure when he was 3rd after contesting what was a solid contested pace. And then next time out, he tried turf and just was in a race with a crazy fast pace and actually made the lead turning for home before backing up in what was a pretty strong race won by Totally Boss in one of these huge pursed allowance races. So he's one that I'm going to lean on pretty heavily in here. I will use some others, but I'm curious what you think about him first.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to do with him. I noticed the pace projector, obviously, and gave him a long look for that reason, as he's just showed on that clear lead. And pace advantages can be even more dangerous going the 7 furlong distance. I'm not sure this particular horse is really suited to 7 furlongs. He's really done his best running going 6, 5.5. He's the kind of horse that runs equally well on turf and dirt, but some of his better dirt efforts, or at least one in particular, came over a muddy sealed track at Oaklawn over the winter. His recent dirt races on fast tracks I have not been as enamored with, so I'm not sure what to do with him. He's not a particularly strong finisher on the dirt, and that just makes me concerned for him getting the 7 furlongs, even with a pace advantage. So I won't be surprised when he hangs on for a long time in this race. I couldn't quite get there to be overly positive about him. But, I mean, he is a price on the morning line, so I get that he is one to consider in here. The horses that I suppose are best suited to the conditions of this race would be the number 5 Gunnet, who we kind of already covered a little bit. Obviously, a good tender in this race, but not the kind of horse that I want to take a short price on. The number 7, Get Her Number, Craig, I think is a horse that we have to discuss. Switching into the Peter Miller barn, though based on some of the news we've read recently, I'm not sure that this is actually a real trainer switch. He ran well last time going the 7 furlong distance against Graded Stakes Company in Southern California. I just kind of wonder about the overall quality of that race and whether it was a true grade 2 event.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, his 113 speed figure he got that day puts him right there in this race and certainly a contender. I am concerned he doesn't really have a lot of early speed, particularly on the dirt. He's shown very little. And even if you don't like County Final, which I totally get your reservations about the 7 furlongs with him, you have to wonder how far back he's going to be. And from that inside post, it was hard for me to make a strong case for him. You already talked about Gunnet. So if I was going to pick a different horse that I think is going to close into this, it would be the 1 Surveillance. I said the rail. I was looking at the wrong horse. The 1 horse Surveillance is actually the one that I would prefer over Get Her Number, just because he's run better speed figures on the dirt, seems to be able to lay a little bit closer for Joe DeSormo, has run those big numbers. And if you don't like County Final, I do think you have to think he's at least going to set a solid enough pace that I think horses that get first run in here could make a jump. So Surveillance would be the next one for me to go to.
Yeah, I have no big problem with Surveillance. His form makes a lot of sense in this race. He gets the distance. He's going to get. He doesn't have to be as far back as some others, as you mentioned. I watched a couple of his races, and he's one of these horses that I feel like his form looks a little bit better than it does when you go back and view the replays. He doesn't come with the kind of big late run that you might expect looking at his running lines. He's got the one big speed figure that he earned in the Commonwealth 3-back, and that's a race that I would say hasn't had the most predictive form moving forward, so wasn't sure what to make of that. But he does make a certain amount of sense in this race, and I'm certainly not against him. He's one that I could see including on my tickets. But Craig, this is a spot that where I thought things could get a little bit wacky. I wanted to look for some prices, and I got a couple that I want to highlight. Not that they're especially likely winners, but just horses that I would want to use in a multi-race sequence. One of them is the number 6 Atoka, who maybe he's just completely off form and he can't run anymore. That's a real possibility, but he's had excuses in his last couple of races. He was checked pretty hard on the backstretch 2-back when he was moving up between horses, kind of got sawed off and just never looked comfortable after that, had no finish to offer. But then he came back in his next race and got a rider switch to David Cohen, and the ride that he was given, I thought, was pretty questionable. This horse broke at the back of the pack, made this big early move to rush up to take the lead through a pretty honest set of early fractions, and understandably paid the price. He had nothing left for the end of that race. Now, it was won by Awesome Jerry, who was the horse that he was sharing the lead with, so it's probably a bad sign that he faded to lose by 17 lengths, but just given the trip that he got in his last couple of races, I think his form hasn't fallen off a cliff the way that the results might indicate. And it wasn't that long ago that this horse was running speed figures that would put him in the mix here. So if he can rebound, he's one that I think is a player in this race. And he does have the tactical speed to be involved in a race where the pace does not figure to be as fast as it's been in a couple of his recent starts. So I would look at him. And the other horse that interests me is the number 8 Haunt. He's a little bit light on the speed figures, but he's one where they've tried a number of different surfaces throughout his career. I do like him on the dirt, especially sprinting on the dirt. They've tried to go longer with him on occasion. I think the 7 furlongs is really going to work for him. He tried the 7 one time last year at Churchill Downs, ran one of his better races doing that. Since then, he's run against horses like Bango and Long Weekend on the dirt. Those are just too tough for him. Now he's switching back to the dirt, also getting into the Shug McGahee barn, which could be a positive. So he's another one that I want to consider, and he's a big price on the morning line.
Yeah, of those two, I much prefer Haunt. I think his form's a little dirtied up by those running on different surfaces the last couple times. He's going to need to improve, which is something a lot to ask for a 6-year-old, but he did come off a pretty long layoff. This is his 3rd start. He's shown pretty close up on the pace projector, 2nd in fact, so I like him a lot more than Atoka. Not going to take too much time beating up on a 15-1 shot. But let's just say I divorced him a while ago after losing money on him a couple times, and I just generally don't ever go back to those horses.
Let's move on to the stakes portion of this Pick 5 sequence. Race 9, the Grade 3 Chicago, going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And Craig, this drew a pretty strong field for a Grade 3 event in this filly and mare sprint division. We've got some major players who have been competitive in Grade 1 races in the past, including horses like Lady Rocket, Bell's the One, Sconsin, Four Graces, who's coming off a 2nd place finish in the Grade 1 Derby City Distaff. A lot of places to go in here, but I do think in assessing these contenders' chances, we have to be aware of that pace projector, and that blue flag favors on under the lead, because there's one horse that looks like she's going to get her preferred trip, and that's the number 3 Lady Rocket.
Yeah, there are 2 horses that I absolutely have to use in here. I'll probably use a 3rd, and one of them is definitely Lady Rocket. Now, I do recall she had a similar looking pace projector for the Madison a couple starts back, but for some unknown reason, Kamari went out on a suicide mission that day and kind of set the race up for the deep closers. But I don't really see any Kamaris in here. Calypso is shown closest on the pace projector as one that would be maybe able to press, but I just don't see it looking at the PPs. There's a pretty big gap between them. So if you think Lady Rocket is still in good form, which I happen to think she is, I think she's clearly the horse to beat. Her last race, maybe it looks a little rough. She was beaten at 6-5. Had a clear early lead early. But when you see who challenged her and who took over in search results, who came back to run a really, really good race on Belmont Stakes Day, I think you can tend to excuse that one a little more. So I think Lady Rocket's super dangerous and the horse to beat. While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and talk about the other one that I have to use. And it's a horse we highlighted on the Pacecast a few months back. And that is the 2-horse Pennybaker. She is a horse who just pretty much blew me away today with the visual watching that race. She ran a nice speed figure of 111, which stacks up very well with some of the favorites in this race. And when I went back and looked at that race, she hasn't run back, but many others have. It was a big field that day. And a full 5 horses out of that race have come back to win. The 2nd, 4th, 8th, 10th, and 12th place finishers have all won races since that day. So for me, that's always a good sign, particularly when you see how easily she was able to beat that field. And she's one I have to use.
Yeah, we like the same horses in here, and I'll just kind of add a couple of things to your analysis. Lady Rocket, I know that, you kind of highlighted this, it might look like she's gone off form a little bit, just given the fact that she hasn't really run back to that huge speed figure that she got in the Gopher Wand back at the end of last year, but you highlighted the excuse that she had in the Madison. She also took some pace pressure last time in the Ruffian, and I want to dwell on that Ruffian for a second, because, you mentioned the winner search results who came back to run a big race in the Ogden Phipps, but that Ruffian might just be a race that's a lot stronger than the speed figure indicates, because search results earned a TimeformUS speed figure that was 10 points higher next time out in the Ogden Phipps. The 4th place finisher Bangsting and the 5th place finisher Make Mischief came back in a common race next time, finished 1st and 2nd in a New York bred spot. Bangsting improved by 8 points, Make Mischief improved by 12 points, so that's a race where 3 horses have come back to improve by an average of 10 speed figure points. That's pretty significant to me. And Lady Rocket, I thought, ran decently in the context of that race. The turn back to 7 furlongs, if anything, is supposed to help her here. And like we said, she's got that very favorable pace setup that she's likely to enjoy. So I think Lady Rocket is very much the horse to beat in this race, though. Like you, Craig, I'm intrigued by that number 2 Pennymaker, who is looking for her 6th victory in a row. It wasn't just her last race at Laurel. She was coming in off a 4-race winning streak ever since they got her off of the turf and onto something resembling dirt, or the all-weather in France, and then dirt last time. She's been unstoppable, winning 5 in a row, and she's been beating some big fields, even going back to her races in France. Field sizes of 15, 16, 12, 10, and again 12 last time at Laurel. So I think the 6 rivals that she's going to have in this race is going to leave her wondering where all the other competitors are. But I think that she's very dangerous. She did not earn a speed figure that's going to make her a winner last time, but she won it so easily, and just the whole aura around her, just how impressive she was, and her pedigree. She's a close relative to Frosted, that very good Met Mile winner for Godolphin on the dam side. So I think there is real potential here. My one concern is I don't think we're going to get that 8-1 morning line. Her last race was so visually impressive. I feel like a lot of people could latch onto this horse, but there's a limit to how low she can go in this race because there are so many others that need to take money. And let's talk about a couple of them. The longtime rivals, the number 4 Bell's the One and the number 7 Sconson. They've knocked heads quite a few times. Often they're the 2 protagonists in the races, but they're just 2 of the contenders in here. I don't think that either one is necessarily a standout, especially not on speed figures.
Yeah, and as a speed figure guy, that's a pretty big one for me. They just don't particularly run all that fast. Sconson, I would probably prefer. She seems to be in good form her last 2. Maybe the speed figures are depressed a little bit because both of them were in slow pace races. She was able to stay closer to it but still get up and win the race. So of the 2, I would prefer her to Bell's the One. But another one who's a regular on the Kentucky circuit that I actually prefer to both of them is 4 Graces. I thought her race on Derby, I think it was Derby Day, where she narrowly lost to Obligatory, was a really nice effort from her. She kind of inherited the lead before Obligatory was able to run her down. But there's no real shame in that, because Obligatory is just in career best form. She ran a really bang up race at Belmont. I think it was the day before the Belmont Stakes. So, and she ran a big speed figure that day. So of all of the local Kentucky horses that we've seen over and over again in these races, I actually prefer the longest of the 3 and 4 Graces.
Yeah, we'll see how big a price 4 Graces turns out to be. She ran so well last time. I feel like she's got to merit some respect off of that. But I agree. She ran a big race in the Derby City Distaff. And watching that race back, it's kind of hard to like Bell's the One, because I mean, she got the right pace setup that day. They really flew on the front end in that Derby City, and Bell's the One had everything go her way from the pace standpoint. She got there at the 8th pole and was right alongside 4 Graces, but it was 4 Graces who pulled away from her in the last furlong. And I feel like that's the problem with Bell's the One. You'll probably remember she's got this amazing record at the 6 furlong distance, but she's just not quite as effective at 7 furlongs. That late run that she has, it kind of just flattens out in the last furlong when she tries the 7 furlong distance. So I'm a little bit concerned about the distance of this race and it maybe just not being right for her, especially with the pace setup the way that it's predicted to play out. She's the one that could really get compromised by that. Sconson, perhaps not quite as much because she's got a bit more tactical speed, but I agree, Craig. I mean, her speed figures, they may be a little bit depressed by pace situations, but she just hasn't run that fast in a while, and she's been running in some stakes races at Churchill. They've really picked her spots for her that have been a little bit weaker than this one. I feel like her reputation has grown, primarily beating up against weaker competition, so I'm not totally convinced that she deserves to be the shortest price in the morning line. She's actually pegged as the 2-1 morning line favorite. I certainly wouldn't want her at a shorter price than the number 3 Lady Rocket. So I would need better value on Sconson. I just don't feel like we're going to get it here. So I kind of think we agree in this race. I'm all about 2, 3, and 6.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree on this one.
Let's move on to the final race at Churchill Downs on Saturday, concluding this pick 5 sequence. It is a nominators of 1 allowance race. As Craig said, big purses for these races, $127,000 for this one. The distance is 6.5 furlongs on the main track, and Craig, we've got 2 recent maiden winners who look like they're going to attract most of the support in here in the number 3 Favorite Outlaw, a horse that ran a big speed figure when he was last seen at Oaklawn Park in January, so he's coming off a bit of a layoff. More recency for the number 4 Top of the Charts, who was an impressive debut winner for Brian Lynch back at the end of May. Seems like both of these horses have some talent.
Yeah, they definitely do. I'm going to try to separate them a little bit. I'm not going to get beat by if either one of these wins. But the key for me is what you said, Favorite Outlaw. He's coming off a layoff, and obviously something went amiss back in February. He had that nice win in January, had a couple works after, then he disappeared until May. And Steve Asmussen is not one that has him fully cranked up most of the time off a layoff. If this were an easier field, I would probably like him a lot more because of that speed figure edge, which he did run faster than Top of the Charts. But I just wonder how cranked he'll be. He is drawn inside of Top of the Charts. And I think Top of the Charts ran a lot better than the speed figure would indicate. We gave it quite a pace downgrade from a 113 final time all the way down to a 102. That's how slow the pace was. But that's really tough to judge with these first-time starters if he's more like a 113 horse. So when you look back in his chart and see the horses he beat that day, it jumped right out at me that the 2, 3, 4, 5 finishers they both ran 1, 2 next out in 2 separate maiden races. The 2, 3 finishers in one and the 4, 5 finishers in another. They both ran good speed figures next time out. So that just has the look of a really strong race to me. And I'm going to give him an edge over Favorite Outlaw here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Watching the replays, I was really impressed with Top of the Charts race. I know that the pace looks very slow, but there were some fast horses in that race, like the 3rd place finisher Woodline, and especially a horse that was off the board, I think, who faded towards the back of the pack, Sinner Sin, a horse for trainer Ron Moquette, who showed a lot of speed over the winter at Oaklawn. And Top of the Charts just basically challenged him for the lead, opened up an advantage, and just kind of put that one in his place very early in the race and was able to open up from there. I really liked the way that he finished off that race, just powerfully coming through the lane. Brian Lynch is in the midst of a pretty strong meet, and I just think that this horse showed a lot of talent in that debut. A little bit of a secret going off at 7-1, but I'm not going to view that as a negative. I just feel like it looks like a sprinter with a future. I would not put too much stock in the fact that he's listed as a first-time gelding for this race. I would find it unlikely that he was gelded since his debut. Often there's not great reporting standards with first-time starters that debut as gelding, so I'm imagining this horse ran as a gelding first time and they just didn't get it recorded until after the race. That's my assumption here. So I view him as very much the horse to beat. You said maybe trying to split them, Craig. Who else were you looking at in here?
The inside horse, Ollie Meister. He's a horse who I think ran pretty well first time out at Gulfstream. Admittedly, it's not as strong at Gulfstream as it was pre-Florida Derby, but I went back and watched the replay, and I was pretty impressed. He also gets a trainer change. I'm not sure if there was a private sale off of that nice win, but he ran a 103 speed figure that day. He did so taking a path you don't often see in these Gulfstream races. He was basically wide all the way around the turn. There was a heavy favorite in there, Bourbon Ready, out of the Todd Pletcher barn that day, who he was able to just go by and basically they were running next to each other and he blew them away. The horse in the inside in that dual moving pictures hung on for a little while, but I really liked what I saw from Ollie Meister. So I do think he has some promise, and I don't want to just concede it to the two favorites.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we should put too much stock in the trainer change because you'll notice this horse was training at Gulfstream right up until last week. So, and also we're going out for the same owners as last time. So this might be a situation where his prior trainer, Joseph Catanese, maybe isn't licensed in Kentucky and he has to run under a different trainer's name just to run here. And I get why they'd ship a horse like this up, given the way the purse structure is. It's much better than running in a non-winners of one allowance at Gulfstream. So maybe that's the reason why he's shown as a trainer switch to Al Stahl, but it does not appear that Al Stahl's been training this horse because I don't believe he has a string at Gulfstream. So yeah, his debut, I agree, from a visual standpoint, looked okay. He was on his wrong lead for the entirety of that race, never switching over. So you want to see a little bit more professionalism in his second start. A horse that was second did come back to win, but did so with a lower speed figure. So I don't know. I didn't think that was the strongest race overall from a quality standpoint, but he definitely did look like much the best that day. If I was going to use another horse, it would be the number 7 Angkor, a horse that they've had trouble kind of deciding what distance they want to focus on with him. They've tried to stretch him out a few times during his career. I do kind of like these elongated sprints for him. I think the 6.5 furlongs is going to be good for him. He came off the layoff to make his 4-year-old debut last time, and I thought put in a pretty game effort, got a decent trip stalking in the pocket and behind horses, tried to come through on the inside late, but was just overhauled by a closer at the very end. He's got to get a little bit faster from a speed figure standpoint, but the trainer Phil Bauer has been in the midst of a very strong Churchill meet. Just feel like he's the kind of horse that could take a step forward second off the layoff and would sit the right trip if they do go crazy on the front end with those two recent maiden winners kind of knocking heads.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, haven't talked much about Favorite Outlaw. How do you view him?
Oh, yeah. I basically didn't have too much to add to what you were saying, Craig. He's got that speed figure advantage, but don't totally know how to assess the layoff. Probably not a great sign that he's been off for this amount of time because there were spots for him to run in at Oaklawn over the winter. So feels like there was a setback coming out of that last race. You talked about Steve Asmussen coming back off layoffs. It just feels like the barn has maybe been a little bit colder than it was at that time of year. So I'm not going to be surprised when he wins this race, but I did prefer the recency of top of the charts like you. Well, Craig, that's a look at the sequence. Let's just briefly go back over things and talk a little bit how we might structure a ticket. It's not going to be easy because just based on the opinions that we put out there, it didn't seem like either of us had too many spots where we could lean on just one horse. So it might be the kind of sequence where you do have to use multiple runners in every leg, but you could use an ABC method to try to separate them and cut down the cost a little bit.
Yeah, in the first leg, I'm going to lean on the 4 and 5 Sunday Grace and Bomb Diggity. I think both of them have good speed. Sunday Grace obviously going to offer a little more value, whereas Bomb Diggity is probably the more likely winner. In that maiden race, I'm going to go with the first time starters, as I mentioned. Maybe I'll throw in Inexorable in there, a horse that you liked, and I can see the virtues of the ones that have run. He is the one that I think does have some upside. I don't really see a whole lot with the others. In that non-winners of, I believe it is 3 allowance race, I'm going to use County Final. He's a horse I think could get loose on the front end. I don't want any parts of Gun It. I'm going to use Surveillance a little bit and Haunt as well. In the stake, 3 horses I'm really going to lean on as A's, Penny Baker, and Lady Rocket. Use 4 Graces more as a C-type horse. And then the allowance race we just talked about, I'm going to use the 2 favorites, Favorite Outlaw and Top of the Charts. I would lean more as Top of the Charts as an A, with Favorite Outlaw as a B, and Ollie Meister like a C type.
Yeah, we have similar thoughts in a few of these races, which is different in a few spots. In the first leg, I liked Short Summer Dress, Queen Goal, and Bomb Diggity, the 1, 2, and 5, though Craig did make a good case for Sunday Grace. I could see using her, for me, as a backup. In the 7th race, that maiden event, the 2 firsters that Craig and I both liked, we're on the same page about them, Call Me Fast and Veritable, and I did like that number 8, Inexorable. He would be one of my main horses in here at what should be a price, kind of like Craig trying to beat the favorites in that race. In the 8th, that allowance race, I'm not so against Gun It that I would want to completely leave him off my tickets because he can win this race. I just don't think he's going to offer that much value. Kind of have a similar take on Surveillance, who I like a little bit more, but would want a bit of a price on him. I was somewhat against County Final, and those 2 long shots that I do want to use prominently are the number 6, Atoka, and the number 8, Haunt. They both need some things to go their way, but I feel like they're going to be prices in this race, and this feels like a wide open race that could produce a somewhat wacky result. In the stakes, Craig and I were on the exact same page. I think Lady Rocket is much the horse to beat. I could probably use her as the A, with my 2 backups being the number 2, Penny Baker, and the number 6, 4 Graces. And then we'll close things out where I would lean a little bit on the number 4, Top of the Charts, but I would also want to have Favorite Outlaw, the 3, and the number 7, Encore, prominently featured on my tickets too. So that's a look at this sequence. Craig, it feels like one where if either of us can put together a winning ticket, it's going to pay pretty well because favorites do not seem like they have that big of an edge here. And there are a few of these legs that seem like they could produce some nice payouts.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I said in the beginning, it's a card I actually really enjoyed handicapping. Good to see some good field sizes, these traditional allowance races, though a couple of them do have optional claiming tags. It's just not something we see as much of anymore, so it's kind of like a throwback to me. And I do think some of these races are going to offer some value. So in addition to playing a pick 5, I'll certainly be playing some of the price horses we talked about in vertical and even win bets.
Well, that's it for the podcast this week. Craig and I will be back on Tuesday to do the TimeformUS Pacecast to recap the stakes at Churchill and some other stakes from all around the country. They're running the Ohio Derby this weekend. Craig and I did a couple of stakes previews that you can catch on DRF's YouTube channel. Also, a couple stakes at Belmont, the Mother Goose. We'll recap all of that on the TimeformUS Pacecast next week. Remember that you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for listening this week, and make sure to tune back in on Tuesday for the TimeformUS Pacecast.